Now this is going to be a demo that we'll do here, but the idea here is that you can modify this and we'll basically set something up for you so that for given whatever your particular art direction is, we'll be able to swap out different bits and pieces of stuff. So, so in Designer, we're going to make a new graph. And for this one, let's go with just metallic roughness. That's a pretty standard way to do things. That's going to be the same format that Unreal is going to understand. And actually, it's going to be the same format that a lot of other engines are going to as well. And I'm going to call this something like tileable. Let's call it tileable A. Can't think of anything else. And again, we've kind of talked a little bit about Substance Designer, but the idea here is that each of these nodes on the right represents the outputs. Those are, at least in this part, the basics of like which texture files that we're going to get. And as you can see, there's a lot of texture files here, way more than what we would get from something like Substance Painter, for example, because we only get 3 from Painter that we like hook up into Engine. We can make that work for this too, but we need to make a couple of modifications. And what we'll do here is we're going to make a really simple. Did we all make a brick pattern before earlier in the semester? No? Okay. All right. So guess what we get to make right now is a brick pattern. I'm just going to double check that my stuff is here. Okay. So we're going to make a tileable texture of just a regular generic kind of brick. We're not going to go into too much detail with it because you can spend a lot of time with this kind of thing. But what I want you to do is, so with Substance Designer, whenever you want to add a new node to attach to stuff, you can just hit the space bar. And that space bar is going to bring up basically all these different nodes. Now, just like anything else, once you become familiar with it, you just sort of know which things to kind of type in, but it can look a little like complex or intimidating at first. But what we're going to start off with here is something called a brick, specifically a brick generator. Okay, so you just start typing in brick, and then you can select brick generator. And what you get is, you can roll in on this, is we can see that there's like a sample. Right now, this little cube in the lower left corner is going to be what our material maps will look like rendered. There isn't anything hooked up, so there's nothing there. But on the right here, this is a representation of this particular node. Okay. So when you click on the brick generator, you can also see over in the right, here's our details panel, or parameters. And there's a lot of things you can slide and adjust here. Some of these nodes have more stuff than others. And it's just familiarity and knowing what you can do with what node. But so for example, what you can do here is you can change the gap in between each brick. So if you wanted something kind of like something different, right? You can do that. You can change things like the bevel amount on X and Y. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to change my bevel a little bit. I'm going to put it in about this in terms of like height values and things like that. What are the areas that are closest to us? Yeah, the white area, the brick, and the things that are farther away from us, receding into the background, is all of the stuff in between, right? So that just has to be front and center in your head at all times when we're playing around with this kind of stuff. But what I want to do here is, a lot of times when we make stuff in Substance Designer, we kind of build it up layer by layer by layer. Okay. So normally what we would do is, actually I am going to do this. I'm going to bring up some kind of reference here so that we can kind of work from it. Again, always work from reference. I want to do just a stylized kind of one. So maybe something that looks a little kind of cartoony. Those are all AI generated. Sure, I'll go kind of go for something like that. I'm gonna go for more of the shape rather than like the actual color patterns, because again, I want to keep this simple for us for today. We can get very deep with this stuff, but I'm gonna keep this a little bit more basic. I'm gonna add some more bricks on X and add some more on Y, just to like bring this, change my ratios a little bit. I want it a little bit wider. Yeah, something like that. That should be fine. Okay, so I want to kind of chip the edges off a little bit with this and kind of like wear it down. Okay, and now is where we have to do some math. Now again, it's okay. Can you count between 0 and 1? Cool. Okay, good. Can you multiply things between 0 and 1? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's just the same as other stuff. That's all you need to know. Can you divide, like basic, between 0 and 1? Yes, you all can do that. Okay. So, what I want to do here is we're gonna just like everything, there's 1,000 ways we can do this. I'm gonna kind of move a little bit quicker with this. What I want here is I want this silhouette that's kind of like wiggly, a little bit like this. And so one way that we could do that is I'm going to run this into a multi-directional warp. So I'm gonna drag this line out and start typing multi-directional warp grayscale. Okay. And what that's going to do is it's going to warp the bricks around. And it doesn't do anything at first. And that's because what it needs is it needs an intensity input. Basically, it needs to know where are we going to warp. Okay? And we just put black and white information in. If we put in a flat, straight, like a field of like white, it's going to just shift everything in one direction, basically. What we want is we want this to kind of like, we look at this, it looks a little bubbly almost, right? Where it's like there's some parts that are kind of pushed in and other things like that. So what we would need is something that looks a little bubbly to help push our direction with this. And so what I'm going to do is there's a particular noise in here that we would use, and it's the Voronoi noise. And when we look at that, we can see it kind of has this like cellular kind of look to it, and it's got a bit of bubbles that kind of work for us. And so the way that this is going to double click on our multi-directional warp, look what it did. It's doing the thing that we are wanting it to do here. Now we can do a couple of things to adjust this. We could adjust, so I double clicked on this multi-directional warp. We could adjust the intensity. If we bring the intensity all the way down to 0, it has no influence. If we bring it up a little bit, or if we go like way too much, right, we get something that looks too noisy. And so just like anything, you just want to kind of like nudge it a little bit. But if I do something like this, I can kind of start to get something that looks a little wiggly wobbly stylized like that. Okay. You also could adjust the thing that's going into driving this, which is this this Voronoi noise. You can change its scale. So maybe we don't want such fine little detail of stuff. Maybe we want bigger warps. And so if I bring the scale back here, you can see that there's not as much dramatic shifting of stuff because the scale is a little bit more uniform. I'm getting more regular values between black and white here. If I pump the scale up way high, right, we can see what it's doing there. And that's the basic kind of idea of how this is all working. Again, it's understanding that values that are closer to 1 are going to have more influence, and values closer to 0 are going to have less influence. And so I like to think about it, it's kind of like just like picture math in a way. So I'm going to bring my scale back to this because that was just a little too much. And I might be just happy with it like this, where it's like I want just like a little bit of like jankiness to it. I also might go back into my base brick generator, and maybe I'm going to increase my smoothness. Let's see. And maybe round out my corners a little bit more too, even further. And now I'm getting something that's looking a little bit more like what I want. Okay. What we can do with this is I'm going to kind of zoom this out a little bit here. I'm going to take the results of this multi-directional warp, and I'm going to plug this into my ambient occlusion. What I'm going to get is this. Because the ambient occlusion is going to tell us which parts of the surface should react to light and which parts should not. So I like soft shadows. In this case, black and white, the areas that are, again, closer to 0, reading as closer and closer and closer to black, is going to receive no light in terms of the rendering, right? And then the other way, you can see how that's all working. You also could plug this into, I'm going to delete this line. I'm just going to select that line and delete it. You also could plug this into your base color, but it won't really do anything because it needs some amount of ambient occlusion to work for that. So I just re-plugged in this white value that's kind of plugging into it. And now we can see here that I'm getting this highlight. And that's because the surface is sort of like evenly, not necessarily evenly shiny, but so much as that the surface will evenly receive light. Okay. All right. Delete that one again just to kind of show what we're doing here. All right. Let's add some color to this. Generally, what you would do is you would wait until the very end to add some color. But I want to kind of like do a little bit to kind of show you how we can do with that. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm gonna pause on that for a moment. Let's add a little bit of surface scuffs to this, kind of because what we can see here is that there's some surface scuffs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a noise, and I'm going to blend that in to this. Okay. If you look in So maybe what we'll do is, I believe there's actually a scratch. Oh, there's a grunge concrete.
There's directional scratches.
What's that?
There's directional scratches.
Yep, that would work. There's grunge scratches, rough shavings, splashes and spots and all that stuff. I'm gonna take the scratches and bring that in because that's a pretty significant detail. And now we can see what this looks like. By its default, it's probably a little too much here. So I'm going to bring the quantity of scratches down a little bit and maybe bring the width down a little bit too, and maybe the length as well. And just kind of play with this until it's the right kind of thing for what you want. But you can see there's a lot of bits and pieces here. Now what I'm going to do here is I want to basically like blend this into this, okay? Now we have a thing here where all the scratches are lighter and all the surface here is lighter. And what we can do is we can do a subtraction. So here's where some basic math is gonna come in, okay? I'm gonna hit the space bar, I'm gonna do a blend, okay? Now this blend, the most important part of this blend node is this blending mode right here. By default, it sets to copy, which sometimes it gets you what you want, but other times not necessarily. Not when we're like shaping this stuff. What I'm gonna set this to is subtract. Now you tell me, when we're subtracting numbers, does the order of the numbers matter? Why? What's that? Because there are negative numbers, yeah. It matters what you are subtracting from what, right? So remember numerator and denominator, right? That whole like mathematic thing. We're gonna think about that kind of logic with this. If we were to think about this, this is the thing, my grunge scratch is rough. This is what I want to subtract. This is what I want to subtract from. When we look at these, when we look at this blend node, if we just click on it, you can see that our nodes have foreground and background. And they're also arranged top and bottom. So you can think about it in this way. This is your numerator, that is your denominator. Okay? So what this means is that if the background is going to be my bricks. When I plug that in, it looks the way that it looks. The thing I want to subtract from my background is going to be this. And when I hook this up, it subtracts it out. Now I did an interesting thing with this, because remember, all of these scratches are all closer to 1 in their value, right? And all this is mostly close to 1 here. But if we think about this number here that's closer to 1 for those particular pixels that are representing the scratch, that is a positive number. Positive number minus another positive number yields that, okay? So that's the kind of math that we're talking about. So you have to think about this. A texture is just a grid of numbers. And those numbers, in the case that we're working with, are gonna go from 0 to 1. And so each pixel is being subtracted from the pixel that we're blending it into. And it does that for the whole texture through the whole resolution. That's the idea. Is that following? A little bit? I mean, if it's still foggy, it's okay. But this is the kind of thing where it's like, for those people that really get into it, it's just like, oh man, there's some really cool stuff with this. There is. Okay, so I got some scratches here. I might not quite like scratches are rough, I'm gonna hit the space bar, and I'm gonna type blur. And I've got blur, high quality, and just a blur, okay? It doesn't necessarily matter which, for this, it's not gonna matter which one that we're gonna use. I generally use blur, high quality, just because again, it's a little bit higher quality, but I'm gonna blur it. Now the problem is, whenever you add a blur node in Designer, it just blows it out way too much, because when you look at this blur node, it's got an intensity of 10. Do you want to sit down, Jackson? When I double click on this node here, it's just obliterating it so much. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this intensity all the way down to 0, and I can see my stuff again. And so I'm going to kind of like hone in on a particular area, the scratch here, and I'm just going to up my intensity just a little bit. I'm like at 0.28, or maybe even something just like maybe just 0.2. And then when I double click on the the result of my subtraction, now this looks a little bit more in character. I can always go back one node, and maybe I do 0.3, and I can see it update right here, what that scratch looks like. 0.4. Yeah, but just enough to like give it a little bit more. And again, you can play around and adjust the knobs all you want a little bit later. Just about finishing up here. This does have some, this example here has some variation in terms of the color. I'm not going to do the color variation, but I do want a little bit of the brick information variety here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into my base brick generator, and I'm going to scroll down to where it says height and slope. And what I can do with this, because this is how this particular node is based on, I'm going to give my bricks a little bit of slope, and you can see what it's doing. It's like kind of like angling half of the brick in. Right? I don't want to go too far with it, but it's kind of angling half the brick in. And then if I angle this slope on Y, I can go either direction. I can go towards or away. Then what I can do is there's this variation, which when I slide this, it's going to kind of randomly make this a little bit more varied, which is really nice, right? Because it's like I don't have to go through and like do all this stuff individually. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some height variation. So I'm going to go to the area above the slope. And if I start sliding this height variation, you can start to see that some of the bricks are going to basically recede into the background more. And then when I get all this put together, you can start to see that we're getting some variety with this. Okay. All right. Are there any questions? Does anyone need help? Yeah. So the blur. So I just used the blur here because my scratches were just too sharp, and because I'm trying to go for something a little more stylized, I just didn't want them to be so sharp.
Okay, so does it produce
I'm sorry?
it produces
Yeah, it's just like the same thing as blur in Photoshop. So if you're like pretty familiar with how Photoshop filters and things like that work and those functions, very similar logic with this. Okay, we're almost there. What I want to do is I want to color my bricks, and I'm going to say like I'll be happy enough with this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the results of this and start before I do that, I'm going to start plugging some of this stuff. Give me a moment to think about this for a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run this into a gradient map. The gradient map is where we finally add color to stuff. Okay. And you'll see that when I run this into a gradient map, the nodes changed a little bit. Up until this point, these have all been just grayscale, right? If they're gray in the interface here, it means it's just a black and white map. That's it. Once we run it into this gradient map, you can see the output changes to orange, which means we've converted that black and white information into color. And when we scroll out a little bit more, we can look at things like the base color output. You can see that it needs a color to make that all work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this into here, and we're not really adding any color to this whatsoever because it's not. It's just basically taking actually this little one here. We don't even need that. I've got this color node here, and it's just taking black and white data and just coloring it with black and white. Okay. When I click on this grayscale map here, you can see I've got this gradient, and this is basically mapping all of the black and white data that's coming in to black and white data. So what happened if we change this to red and this to blue? So we have red where black is and blue where white is. How would that affect this? What would we get? Yeah.
You get very, very red shadows, very green highlights.
Yes. Why?
Because the blue is replacing the white and the red is replacing the black, so all of your shadows that are creating the pattern are going to be red, and all of your highlights that are creating the bumps are going to be blue.
Yes. Does that make sense? Let's demonstrate that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on my gradient, and I'm going to get color keys. And so what I can do here is I'm going to click on the one that's here, and it's going to bring up my gradient editor. And I'm going to set this one to blue. And now I've got blue shadows. I'm going to click on my other key, red highlights. It's not great, but it illustrates that idea, right? I'm just filling in. Again, you can think about it kind of like we're dyeing these colors. We're dyeing these spaces. Now this is one way that you can do things. You can just say, okay, here's my scale from here to here. You can add other colors, other color keys. So maybe I want this one to be green. And now I've got something where, again, any of the black and white values that are in this range are going to receive this color. And that's why this appeared this particular way. So I kind of have different brick colors, but again, there's better ways. We can talk later if that's something you want to do. But I don't want any of these. What if I wanted like this, maybe like this particular color? Because I really like how that looks, or maybe even like this one, for example. Right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to clear all my color keys. And now this is a different window, right? This is my web browser. It could also be my PureF4. Okay. I'm going to go click on Pick Gradient. I have an eyedropper, and it works outside the window. So what I can do now is, wherever I start drawing, that is going to be the leftmost part of my graph. So this is going to be, I'm going to fill in the black values to white values. Okay. So if I start here in this darker area of the image and end over here, I'm going to get that kind of gradation. So you can see how this works. And I just click and drag. It's sampling every pixel in between. And it tries to fill it in as best as it can. Right? So you can see what it did here is it kind of picked up the fact that there was some my value was lower here, my value was a little bit higher when I ended. We can do that. I'm going to clear Yeah, we can do the same thing for this image or for really any of these things. And that's why, again, it's really important to have references, even if you're doing more stylized stuff. You want to know what your colors are going to be. Again, it works really great for photographs because if I were to do this one, it would grab tons of different little values all the way through, and you can get some really nice detail that way if you're going for more realistic or doing stylized too. All right, so that's my base color. I'm kind of like happy with that for now. We'll come back to it. Okay. I've got a normal map here, and I want this to feel like a normal map, right? So the normal map, you can see there's a gray input here. So we need to feed this some black and white data. Okay. I could just take this output from my black and white data and put it in here, and then I get that, right? So the normal map is going to read the areas of light and dark on this, and it's going to, again, think about this in terms of like height. The areas that are closer to 0 are going to be low. The areas that are closer to 1 are going to be high, and kind of immediately gives us something interesting to look at. You can see that there's some of the pits and other bits and pieces here. You can adjust the intensity. So in this normal node, its function is to take black and white data and transfer it into a normal map. So when you click on this normal node, you can change the intensity. Right now, it's set at 1. If I set it down to 0, it looks like we would expect it to. If I start bringing it up a little bit, I can get like the hint of an impression. If I really want to go all out, I can go 3. And also type in 100. And like it just starts doing stuff we don't want it to do, so too much. What I am going to do is I'm going to kind of keep this as about like that. I'm a little bit happier with that. Okay, so that's our normal map. This black and white map, we're also going to use this for our roughness. Now remember, roughness is going to be a value between 0 and 1. If we have a roughness of 0, i.e. we're feeding it mostly values that are on the darker range of the spectrum, what is the surface going to look like? Mark,
Shiny.
why shiny?
Because 0, so there's no roughness.
There is no roughness. Like, yes, we have no roughness, right? Exactly. Yeah. So what we can do is we could potentially feed this whole map in, but I'm going to get really shiny grout lines, which I really don't want in this particular case. So what it is feeding in is this uniform color. So if I hook on this and then sort of like shift this, I can get kind of like a uniform sense of how this all looks. So it's like it's a little bit reflective, but it's not like glazed subway tile reflective. We could feed it something else too. We could give it something like, well here, I'm gonna, my Voronoi noise, if I just hook that up into it, you know,
Moldy wall.
it's moldy wall, maybe it's like drying wet, like a drying puddle. But you can see how this translates into that roughness. I think for right now, I'm just gonna leave this kind of like even. Okay. Ambient occlusion. Metallic. Okay, right now metallic is just off. This is not a metal wall, but we absolutely could make it into a metal wall, and now it kind of has a look that feels kind of like, I don't know, it's been like an enameled metal or something like that. Maybe it's like a bike frame, which is kind of cool. I'm gonna keep that.
Ooh, yeah.
Stylize, you can do whatever you want. Okay. With metallic surfaces, the general rule of thumb is it's either metal or it is not. There are not many things that are like kind of metal. It's all, you're either all in or not. And you use the roughness to control the shininess of it. scratch it up. And at this point, like you probably wouldn't be able to tell that it's metallic, but there's still some qualities to it that we might want, that we'll consider for rendering purposes. I'm gonna give it just a little bit here, because I like that feeling of it's like doing stuff. Okay. Ambient diffusion, that's down here. Right now it's being fed a uniform color of white, so it's like all the way up at 1, which means the entire surface is getting even amounts of light. If we didn't want the grout lines to appear, right? So we think about like this area is going to be considered off. I'm going to take this and hook this in, and now it's if I just hook it in straight like that, basically the grout lines are going to receive 0 light. That might be a little too much, right? That's maybe like a little too harsh, because we might want the grout lines to have something there. So what we could do is before it gets to this output of ambient diffusion, we could tell it to modify this a little bit, and we could just use levels. And it's just like in Photoshop, like using the levels. So I'm going to click on this line between these two here. I'm going to hit space. And when I do that, it'll insert the node right in there for me. So I'm going to do levels. And at first, it doesn't do anything. But if I start playing with grading here, I can, really like blow out some white areas because that's too much. I could also bring up the overall value here, and when I do that, bring that up. You can see that it's actually bringing this out a little bit. Now, part of the reason why it looks this way is because I actually have color that is black that's built into my base color. If I deleted that, you could see this change a little bit more. So if I go back to my levels, so you can see I'm basically playing with the shadow intensity, like how that's all going to work. Right, so if I wanted the grout lines to kind of fade a little bit, but not be like totally gone, that's how I do that. Okay. The last thing is height. For most things, I would say probably for maybe like 60% of your textures, you're probably not going to need the height for things, because that's really good for displacement. Remember the last time we talked about landscapes and using height maps, black and white data, to do that? That's the same kind of principle. But I'll do this just to kind of show. I'm going to hook, again, this basic one here into my height map. And what it will do is, when you look at it from the side, now I actually have visible height differences. And it really just emphasizes that a little bit more. Again, it's really good for like rendering stuff out, like if you're doing offline kind of rendering. It looks all pretty. You've probably seen those things where people are making like substance materials, and it's just like, it's all on a sphere, but it's actually made out of bricks and things like that. That's just height displacement. So you can use a texture to model for you, those kinds of details, especially if it's like repetitive stuff. You want to avoid modeling all that stuff. Okay. Yeah, real basic stuff. Are there any questions? Do we want to do like a quick border, like in the background here? Would that be useful? Okay. So what you do here is, so this is all basically all on one material. You can see like how my graph is set up. Everything is coming out of this thing. Okay. We could take this and blend this into some other stuff and get some kind of like border in the background. And so what that would look like is this. I'm going to first start with a noise. I'm going to do a concrete grunge, or grunge concrete. when you get comfortable with this, you can just like churn out texture after texture after texture after texture. And it's can really make your workflow very efficient. The onboarding is high. I'm not expecting you all to become experts at this. But if you at least know that it's there and then you can maybe look up some things or make a basic thing with it, that's not too bad. It's not too bad to do. All right, there we go. I've got my metal enamel bricks and this kind of grayish texture here.
Molten silver.
Yes. All right. One last thing that we're going to do here is we're going to prep this for bringing these tileable textures over to Unreal, and then we'll give you a break, and then we'll come back to the Unreal side of things. Okay. So if I were to export this out right now, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 textures. That's too much, right? That's too many things, and we want to be able to pack these things together, because our goal here is to reduce the number of texture files. We always want to reduce texture files, because that's where the biggest bloat in packaging a game comes in, and it's pretty resource intensive. So, remember red, green, blue channels, right? My base color has red, green, and blue channels working in it, okay? So I'm using all those channels. My normal map has red, green, blue data in it. I'm using all 3 of those channels, okay? My roughness, metallic, ambient, and ambient occlusion fill. These are all black and white maps. So what could we do with them? Yes, we can take those, we can set those, manually pack those into a red channel, into a green channel, and into a blue channel. Okay? That's what we're gonna do. What we're gonna create is a node called RGBA merge. And what it gives us is the individual channels for stuff. And so now, what I could do is for my roughness, if I wanted my roughness to look like this, I would actually, hold on a second. The order is important, okay? Because this is going to become our ORM map. Our ORM, okay? Do you remember what ORM stands for?
Occlusion, metallic, roughness.
Yes, very good. Occlusion, metallic, roughness. Sorry, occlusion, roughness, metallic. Yeah, that's one. So the ambient occlusion is going to go into the red channel. Bam. And now you can see, here it is, it's red. But again, it's just, is there data here or not? Or what data is in between? My roughness goes into the green channel. And then my metallic goes into the blue channel. Now I technically have another slot open. Remember, this is a car that holds 4 people. We got 3 people in the car right now. You could put another person in this car. You can pack your height map into it if you have need for it. Actually, I'm going to do that because we will have need for that. So I'm going to take this result type blend and bring this in, and there we go. Okay. Now the next step is bringing in output, because right now this is just going to take all these things, put them all into one, and we need an output for that. And to do that, we just type output, and that's it. Okay. It is going to ask for an identifier. So I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it RM and then H for height. There is one more thing that we want to double check. Okay. Now remember last time when we were doing the landscapes and we were having some issues with a PNG 16-bit versus version was all like terraced and everything else like that. For textures, we want the opposite direction. We generally want all the textures to be 8-bit and not 16. This is primarily kind of like an Unreal Engine kind of thing, so just understand that. But it's also good to know what kind of, the number of bits. This doesn't affect the visual quality, whether it's 8 or 16-bit. It's almost imperceptible. But for certain ways that we're reading the data, or let's just say for certain ways that the data is going to be interpreted, it does matter if it's 16 or 8-bit. Okay. So in general, again, in general, you want your base color to be 8-bit. Okay. And how we do that is you go to the node right before. This is not hacky, but it's not elegant. Okay. You go to the node that is leading into the final base color output, and you can go to where it says output format. There's this little node icon. It looks kind of like if Picasso were to paint a toilet almost. It's sort of like a cutest rendition of a toilet. That's the best way to remember it. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to set this to absolute. Because I want to make sure that it says, like, no, this should be 8-bit. Okay? And when I do that, it will set this to 8 bits, and you'll see the number here, C8. So now I'm good. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing with this, my OR. Okay. I'm going to set this, go to the Picasso toilet, absolute 8 bits per channel, C8. Okay. Everything else is fine. Okay. But in the end, I'm going to have it output this one, and that one. And that's how you get down to 3 textures instead of 6. Okay. I'll have the same amount of data. It'll all look exactly the same. I'll just have fewer things I have to keep track of. And that's always a good thing. Okay. The last step we're going to do here is we're going to output this. So I've got my tileable A. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on that node, the little like hooky uppy things, the little octopus, and I'm going to go down to export outputs. Okay. And when I do that, it's going to say, okay, where do you want this thing to go? I've got a folder set up here called materials. I'll be happy with that for now. Okay. You can see here, it is going to give you a preview of what this looks like. So it's going to have a prefix of tileable A, and then it's going to have an underscore and then the name of the map, which is really useful for us. But you can see here's all the maps that it wants to output. So which ones do we need? Or I should say, which ones don't we need because of how we set this up? So I've got my my packed map. Do we need that one? Yes. Okay. So we're gonna leave that one checked. The next one, base color. Do we need that one? Yes. Next one, normal. Do we need that one? Yes. Next one, roughness. Do we need that? Why not?
Because it's all one solid color for roughness.
I'm sorry.
Because it's all one roughness.
Because it's all one roughness, and where is that data though? It's in my ORM hub, right? So I can uncheck my roughness, my metallic, my height, and my ambient occlusion because I don't need those. And now you can leave it as a PNG, it's fine. I'm going to export this. It's going to do it, and it's done. You'll note that, I'm going to close this one. You'll note that along the top here, you can see parent size. This is set to 2K by default. That's generally pretty fine. If you really want to go crazy, yeah, you can make it 8K, but your texture size is going to be probably about 30 meg per texture file. So it's like obscene. But if you're doing like really high end, like if you need to do like render out cinematics, then it doesn't matter, right? It's all pre-rendered. But you can change this to 4K if you want, and then just see what the difference is. But whatever this is set to, this is going to be output for us. All right, I'm gonna bring this down. I'm gonna go into my materials folder, and here is tileable A, my base color, my normal map, and my form block. Here it is. All right. Let's take a break, because the next stop is going to be Unreal and playing around with stuff in Unreal. Well, I avoid something kind of like that. Something that will work pretty decently for this is something like, we'll just do this grunge map number 2. Actually, I don't like that. We'll do grunge 3. Yeah, almost the same. But I'm just going to do this grunge 3 just again for example here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to output this. I'm going to just call it mask. Okay. Now, we've got this issue here where this is a 16-bit, and we don't want that. So there's one of two things we can do here. Okay. One is we could run this into a levels node and not do anything with it, but in the levels node force it to absolute, and now it's that. Okay. The other thing that we could do is we could say, you know what, maybe we actually don't really need our height. Maybe we pack the mask in with our form. We can do that. Your normal map and your base color both have alpha channels as well, and those are currently unused. If you want to be super duper cool, you use the alpha map, the alpha channels for your base color and your normal maps as well, and then you can fit a whole bunch of people into a car that way. Okay. Now the thing is, if you do that, you have to set that standard immediately with your team, where it's like everyone understands you're going to use the alpha channel to pack this particular map, because the goal here is that you set up your materials in Engine, and it doesn't matter which engine that you're using. You set up your materials and you build your shaders around that understanding that this is how we're going to do it. You may have slightly different use. All right. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import my stuff. So I'm going to go into this file. So I've got tileable. We have 4 textures. And so drag and drop them in. And there they are. There's all 4 of them. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to build our material. This is standard kind of way to do things, and show a couple of more advanced stuff that we can do with this. So I'm going to create a new material in Engine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call this I'll call it M-tileable parent. Because remember, the workflow that's really efficient here is you kind of hook all the spaghetti, you hook the spaghetti at once. And then what you do is you create material instances of it, and then you have a couple of easier things to adjust. You just like switch textures out that way. That way you're not spending all your time dragging and dropping stuff. Okay. So, tileable parent. I'm going to open this up, and again, hopefully this is familiar enough for you. But what I'm going to do is take all of these things, all 4 of these textures, and drop them in here. And I'm going to save it. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to start hooking things up. Okay. I've got my base color. Base color goes into base color. I've got my mask. I'm not going to worry about that just yet. I've got my normal map that goes into the normal input. And I have my form page. Red. Where does red go? Occlusion. Yep. Where does green go? So roughness. And blue is my metallic. Now, the way the engine is rendering things, it tends to want to like, the metallic gets kind of blown out. So you often will need to do some adjustments to your roughness, because again, you still want to keep the metallic as is metallic, but the roughness is just too low for us. And so what I'm going to do is between the G channel and my roughness, I'm going to drag something out here, and I'm going to make a multiply node. And then I'm going to hook the results of this multiply node up to my roughness. Now, we're multiplying, right? And now. So my roughness is very low, which means what color or what value is my green most likely? Was that?
White-ish. Right? Or is it black? Oh, right. 'cause
Yeah,
black
and that's
is-
the thing.
black
It's
is
like,
zero,
yeah, it's opposite exactly. Yeah. So the values that are in green are darker, but I'm multiplying them by 1. So what am I going to get?
Same result.
The same thing,
Yeah.
right? So what if I want to boost this? What if I want to boost my roughness value? What would I?
Bigger than one.
Why bigger than 1?
Actually, it should be smaller.
Why
Because
smaller?
it's a fraction between 0 and 1.
Okay, if I make it a fraction, what's that going to do to my overall value? Say, okay, we'll throw some real numbers. Let's say that my G is 0.8. Okay. 0.8 multiplied by 1 is 0.8. Okay. What is 0.8 times, what is half of 0.8?
Half of
0.4, and that's gonna have some impact on stuff, right? So you can also think about this as like 100%, right? And so like 120% would be like 1.2, or anything else like that. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to right click on the B output, and I'm going to promote this to a parameter. What this is gonna let me do is it's gonna let me just like play with the numbers up and down until I find the thing that I want. So I'm promote it to a parameter. I just right clicked on the little radio button for B. I'm gonna call this roughness adjust. And by default, it's gonna give me a 0. I first have to apply. So I've got everything that's coming through here. It's close. It's a value closer to 0. I'm sorry. In my example, I was wrong. We'll say like this is like a 0.1. If we multiply 0.1 times 1, it's still 0.1. If we do 0.1 times 0.5, it gets lower. If I want to boost this up more, 2, 5, 10. So now I'm basically multiplying it by 1,000% effectively. Yeah, exactly. Still made of metal. You know, I mean, it's like, yes, technically it's rendering metal, but it's just like, it's kind of doing a weird thing with it. But if I do this at like a 5, now I get that kind of enameled look that I was looking for. And that's all controlling the roughness. So whenever I'm building materials, I always build a roughness adjust into it, because it's like, it always looks so different between things. And the more flexibility you give yourself, because with an engine, right, what you see is what you get. All right, so I'm gonna pretend I'm happy with that. And what I'm gonna do is, my wall, I'm going to do this so that all of my walls will get that tileable name. No. I'm going default. I'm gonna make a copy of this, and I'm gonna kind of slide this out for demonstration across this. I'll select these three, alt. Just for fun. Here. Okay. So, not too bad. I mean, we get close up to it, and you know, we can see that there aren't any repeats or obvious scenes. We can, though, as we pull out, start to see the repetition, though, right? And that's the thing that we want to avoid. So the next step is the thing that we're going to do to break this up. Okay. And we're going to start playing around with something called world space. Has anyone played around with world space stuff before? Anyone in the shaders class? Can't remember. No? Okay. So here's the thing. Everything that we've been doing up until this point has been done in what we call local space. But the coordinates of the textures are based on the object. When we're talking about world space, we're saying, forget about the UVs of the object. Focus on the bigger, broader world here. And what that looks like is it looks like this. I'm going to go to my tileable parent here. I'm going to come back to my mask here. And the mask is the thing I want to make in world space. Okay. And so what I'm going to do here is I need to actually convert this into a different kind of thing. I need to make this into a texture object, and that's just because of how the engine is going to kind of compute this. So I just right click on the mask that I imported in, and do convert to texture object. Okay. And it looks like this, which, you know, it's a little bit different, but otherwise it's pretty much the same. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new node, and this is where all the magic happens all in one node, which is really nice. And it's called World Aligned Texture. And looks like that. Okay. So world aligned texture, it needs a texture object, and that's why we have to convert this thing. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook this up here. And I also need to specify a texture size. Okay. Now you'll notice here that behind each of these inputs, there's like T2D. That stands for texture 2D, right? V3, that's a vector 3, which means red, green, blue, right? Similar things are here. This is a scalar. This is scale bounds, I think. Yeah, anyway. We do need something in texture size. Now the thing is, I don't want to have 3 numbers, I just want 1 number. And the cool thing is I can just press the 1 key and click. And I'm going to convert this to a parameter. So this is just a base constant or 1, and then click. Convert this to a parameter. I'm going to call this noise size. Okay. By default, 64 is what this is going to be starting at, and we're going to adjust this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hook this up and hook this into texture size. Okay. Now nothing is going to happen because nothing is going to hooked up here. But the idea here is we've got this whole thing of brick, this whole like wall of brick. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that noise pattern to overlay on top of all of this. And that whenever we move that brick wall, that noise will always be there, but it will be different at every location. Okay. When you were to do this kind of technique, you usually want really big scale stuff to make it work. And I'll show you why. But what we're going to be doing here is basically taking this and blending this in to this texture. Now this texture and all the other bits and pieces, these are all based on the UVs of the mesh But it's using the mesh UVs and projecting it onto there. This part's different. So this is gonna be like, think about this like layers in Photoshop, okay? This is gonna be a layer that we're gonna put on top of this, okay? So, what we need to do is we need to blend these together, and one way that we can do that is a blur. It's called linear interpolation. What it does is you have an A input, a B input, and an alpha, which tells you how much of the B to put into the A. Okay? For making this work, what we need to do is we need an A input. The easy thing for that is it's going to be our texture sample. Okay? This is the thing that we're going to be blending stuff into. We also need a B. Yeah. Oh, linear interpolation. If you press the L key and then click, it will make alert for you. Yeah.
So you press L and then we do what?
Quick.
Just L then click.
Okay.
So for making for like the shortcuts for Unreal, it's like 1 and click, or L and click, or S and click, and that will alert corresponding to different nodes and stuff like that. Right. So what I'm gonna do is we have an alpha that's here. So this is 0.5. Now the alpha again, this is gonna tell us our strength. Now this is a value that goes between 0 and 1. What else do we have here that goes between 0 and 1? Our mask, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this X, Y, Z, plug that into our alpha. What that will do is give us a mask that is in world space. And now what we need is we need something to go into B. Okay? Now B can be anything. It could be another texture. It could be a basic color. And then what we'll do is we'll demonstrate with the basic colors just to kind of show, and then we'll show you how you can swap some stuff out here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press the 3 key and click. Okay, that's going to give me a vector 3, which is going to be red, green, blue channel. Okay, and I'm just going to hook this up into B, and I'm going to right click this and convert this to a parameter. I'm going to call it grunge color. Now the thing is by default it is set to 100% value of 0, right? So it doesn't work if you leave it because it's like it turns it off. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something like darkish, brownish, something like that. Click OK. And then the last thing I need to do is take this blur and put it into my base color, because that's the thing. That's where this is going to live. This is going to live in my base color. And now you can see what it's done here. It's overlaid using this. Now I'm going to apply. Like literally.
I'm glad you said it, cause.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Alright, let's do something different here.
Red.
Blood, everyone's happy.
Yeah.
Alright, so. So, now at first, right? Now this is working, but it's not doing the thing that we want here, because it's doing a regular repeat. Now, remember when I said that my default is set to 64? Yeah.
Where do we drag the whole thing to again?
Base color.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so the way we can think about it is what we want is this lerp is sort of like take this texture, add in this texture, but use this whole thing as a mask. Okay. That's the basic logic. My default value here is 64. Now I'm not going to mess with it here, okay? Because I had already created a material instance for it, and that's the one I want to modify. What's that? Oh. So I open this up and I look at my old scalar parameters. I'm gonna drag this off so we can see what this looks like. Now, when I change my noise size, if I go smaller, that's gonna make it really, really tiny. So if I do like a noise size of 10, it gets. If I do a noise size of 2048, now we can see it's still going to repeat, right? Because there's no way that we can get around that. It is always going to repeat. But if we're looking at this on an individual level, all of a sudden now it's broken up this whole repetitive texture. The other thing is if I grab all these guys and move them. Whoa, what's that? That's the difference between local space and world space. World space does not move. Okay? It is based on fixed coordinates that are on the world. Local space moves with the object. Because as the object's coordinates change, so too do the UVs. Yeah.
Does the image change when you move it back and forth?
No.
Interesting.
It does change.
Why does it know how to do that? Blood floor. Is it just like morph from one? Because obviously it's like the map is on flat, but how does it know how to
Yeah, how does it know how to do that? Yeah. So it's all based on this. So you'll see here that the way that we set this up was that X, Y, and Z. So in Unreal, X and Y are on the ground and Z is up, right? So what this is going to do is if we put this on a cube, we could rotate that cube around and each face would be a little bit different. We can control this and say, you know what, maybe I don't want it on Z. Okay, maybe I just hook this up here instead. And so what we should get now is, as it comes down to something closer to 0, it's kind of stretching it out, and we're not getting that same level of stuff that we're looking for. So, as we get to as we pass a certain threshold, this stringiness is basically like when you have a UV that's totally flat, and it's like taking one pixel and just like squeezing it and like dragging it across the whole thing. It's kind of similar to that. You could do something where it's like, you know what, I don't want this on Z. Now I get the same kind of stringy thing. You can see here it's being added onto there. So you can see the difference here. So when I rotate this down, now it's only going to be on the floor. But you can, again, there are certain amounts where it's going to kind of interpolate a little bit between them. And so it'll feel smooth and everything, but again, you'll still get that same effect of like moving things around.
Is it possible to apply world-aligned textures to the entire texture?
Yes. So, what we can do is, let's say, I'm going to convert this to a texture object instead. Run this into a world-aligned texture. X, Y, Z. And my base color. Now this
here, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna detach all these other things temporarily. On this one. Just got this. Bye. And now I've got this Willow Mines texture, and I need to change scale. It's a little too much. Oh, this up into my texture size. There we go. So now what I can do is goes up and down. Like that. When you apply this to, oh here, I'll just do this on this, that, that.
Cool.
I can even mash these together horribly, and it's as easy as cross.
Sick. Why is that standard?
Huh?
It feels like that should be standard. Is there a reason? Is it?
Well, because it's like a lot of times you don't want that. Like you want to have individual control over these. But now I can make all sorts of shapes that I don't have to actually want. Okay? I can just take this and make a couple of like weird things out of it, and it doesn't matter where it is. Feel continuous. So you can see like that curve now is going to carry around here. Can you imagine trying to lead that? That would not be a lot of fun, would it? So that's a really nice feature of working in world space like that. That again, I can take all this stuff and I can like mash it into here, and now I've got continuous, seamless brick pattern. That's all world space. There are some areas right where it's like you can start to see where this kind of fading in and fading out is this. It's a rounded shape, right? So it's going to be a little bit on X, a little bit on Y, and everything. But otherwise, you can kind of blend all these things together pretty seamlessly. Obviously, it's not going to blend perfectly here. But the nice thing is that again, if you've got like, I was working on a project before where I had to create a bunch of cobblestone streets and things like that. And I decided, I was like, I'm just gonna put this all in world space and then put these on tiles. Because I can just put the tiles on top of each other and it actually doesn't matter that they're intersecting. The nice thing with world space is it eliminates Z fighting. So you'll never get Z fighting with world space. However, it has limitations, right? If you want to do something that requires something a little bit more explicit, something like that, I mean, you're getting this kind of weird thing that's happening. So you need to know both ways, because you need to know what the right way is for the situation that you're dealing with. A lot of times when you're dealing with modular kits, and you want to make sure that things are seamless, and if you have a pattern that's pretty homogeneous, you can run it through like that. And then of course what you can do is, you can combine a world space texture like this, a world space mask, and it can be different levels and different scales. You just have to basically repeat that same logic, and then you can throw this stuff over everything. Okay.
Sort of. Just like clarification. So then all you really need to do is like make a world version of the like material and a regular version that like doesn't have all of that, and then you can have the best of both worlds theoretically, if you need it, obviously.
Yeah, if you need it. So in the workflow in Unreal it looks like this. In Godot, there's similar things where then you can specify whether a texture is world space or not, and things like that. So again, the logic is the same. How you use it is going to be the same. Like I said, if you've got multiple pieces, you don't want to necessarily UV them. It's just like, this is just going to be a big like smokestack or something like that. You can just do that all to your heart's content, and you never know that it's 3 different pieces because it's so perfectly tiles, because it's in world space. And then again, you control in in this case, the size here, the texture size with this variable. Yeah. I'm just gonna jump back here. Now you might have an instance where, you know what, I want normal maps like this. It's the same thing. Convert this to a texture object. Normal maps are different. They require a different type of node. There's world align normal, and world align normal works this way. And you've got a couple of options that are a little different. You've got this flat top option, which may or may not be something that you want. But what I'm going to do for now is this up here, apply it, and now I'm getting my normal map information. But you can see the normal map is at a different scale than the other stuff. So all I need to do is just make sure this is the same scale. I'm going to use the same scalar parameter so that I can adjust one thing. And now, there we go.
Why don't we paint brick walls like that?
I don't know. I mean, that's your job as an artist. Make the world a better place with metal bricks. Yeah. All right. Now again, this is good for really big stuff. There are going to be other times you want the control. Like this doesn't work with trim sheets, for example. This is best used for when you've got one texture and you want to just put it on a bunch of different things, and then you want those things to feel seamless together. You still need to be able to UV. You still need to understand the trim sheet workflow. But again, this is hopefully another tool that you can consider for the particular situation that you're in. Any questions? All right. Sorry I talked so much today, but again, hopefully this was interesting and useful. If not for this project, maybe a future project. And again, it doesn't matter which game engine it is; they all can do world space stuff. You just have to know what you want to do with it. I'm going to put this back to how it was before, making use of that grunge, just so that you can see how that looks again, in case something wasn't working good. But what I will do is we'll come around and then check in with everybody. So I'll leave this up once I have it all set. Yeah.
I have a quick question. if you're
Yes.
available. Just unrelated to what we've been talking about.
Okay. I think it's a slide, but one is like a little too. I'm not like a squeamish person when it comes to this stuff, but it just makes me feel uncomfortable. Like,
You don't like grammar? Ooh, never mind. Yeah, I don't like that either.
Well, if it's just get neon.
If you make it spray paint, I think it'd be cool.
That's not what that was.
There you go, that looks cool. Take one of these stripes.
Someone's drawing all over the place. It's
Ghostbusters. Slammer Ghostbusters.
Here, and I'll set the scales.
That's that she
So you also see that like there is a certain you can adjust this to where it's like it's a little more subtle, and so you've got kind of this covering that looks like that.
Look at the floor. The floor looks weird.
What's that?
The floor looks weird when you have it scaled that way.
Right.
Because of the axis.
So you can do things, and so here now you can see that
Cool.
this is no longer in world space, and so it's actually using PVs, which is why this went back to the way that it did, and like all that stuff. So again, it works best for walls that are pretty simple. But you can do a lot with very little. And it works for things that aren't walls, like if you want rocks that have like streaks of grime on it, like if there's iron in it and it's oxidizing a little bit, or if there's like lichen growing on it, you can do that. So you can create a mask that would go on a material that you like made from hideable poly. And then every time you place that rock in the scene, it's gonna look a little different. No. Yeah, so like, yeah.
Ryan's hair was worse than so extra.
I think there's a tutorial on this, online, but do feel free to, yeah, taking those photos and stuff like that.
Maybe they think yourself on that.